I prayed the same prayer for 11 weeks. Every morning. Same words, same posture, same desperate sincerity of a woman who had watched her marriage walk out the front door with a single bag and was asking the only source she had left to bring it back. I lit a candle sometimes. I kept a prayer journal. I underlined verses. I did everything a woman of faith does when she is serious about being heard. Everything except the one thing my pastor said to me on a Wednesday afternoon in September that made me put down my pen and sit in silence for a very long time. He said, "Heather, God has been answering your prayer. He has been sending the answer through your husband for years. The question is not whether God was listening. The question is whether you were." My name is Heather Jackson, and this is the story of how I spent 6 years rejecting the answer to a prayer I had not yet learned to pray correctly. Wesley and I had been married for 6 years when he left. We were living in Birmingham, Alabama, a house we had bought in year 2, 2 sons named Caleb and Noah, who were 7 and 4, a church community we had been part of since before we were married. Wesley was a project manager for a civil engineering firm, methodical, principled, the kind of man whose faith was not loud but was structural, built into the way he made decisions, treated people, showed up for his family in the unglamorous daily ways that do not photograph well but hold everything together. He had been trying to reach me for 3 years before he packed that bag. Not with ultimatums, not with dramatic interventions or tearful speeches. Wesley's attempts to reach me looked exactly like Wesley. Quiet, consistent, delivered in the specific language of a man who believed that love was demonstrated rather than declared. He came home every evening and asked about my day with genuine interest. He created Saturday mornings that were designed around what I needed rather than what he wanted. He prayed over our family out loud, something I had initially found moving and had slowly, without noticing the shift, begun to tune out the way you tune out a sound that has become too familiar to register as significant. He tried the direct approach twice. Once in year 4, sitting across from me at the kitchen table on a Sunday after church, telling me carefully that he felt a distance between us he did not know how to close alone, and asking whether I felt it too. I told him I was tired and that things would improve when the boys were older and life was less demanding. He nodded, went quiet, continued being Wesley. Once in year 5, a harder conversation, more specific, with the particular edge that arrives when patience has been sustained past its natural limit, and something underneath it has begun to show. He told me he had been feeling invisible in his own marriage, that he came home every day to a woman who was present in every logistical sense and absent in every way that mattered to him. That he loved me and he loved our sons and he was not going anywhere, but he needed me to hear him. I heard the words. I did not receive what was underneath them. I went to a Bible study that week and asked the woman in my group to pray for my marriage. I described it in the careful, vague language of a woman who wants intercession without accountability. We've been disconnected. Things have been hard. Please just pray. They prayed. I felt better. I went home and continued being absent in all the ways Wesley had specifically named. By year 6, Wesley had gone quiet in a different way than his natural quiet. His natural quiet was the quiet of a man comfortable in his own skin, the stillness of someone who did not need to fill every space with noise. The new quiet was different. It was the quiet of a man who had tried every available avenue and had arrived somewhere past the trying. Not angry, not bitter, simply finished in the particular way that people are finished when they have given everything they had to give and have received nothing back that indicated the giving was noticed. He left on a Thursday morning in June. Caleb was at school, Noah was at my mother's. Wesley came into the kitchen where I was making coffee and told me he was leaving for a while. Not forever, not with legal intention, simply because he needed to be somewhere that was not a house where he had been invisible for 3 years and had run out of ways to change that alone. He took one bag. He kissed me on the forehead before he walked out. That detail has stayed with me longer than anything else. The forehead kiss. The specific tenderness of a man who was leaving not in anger, but in exhaustion, who loved me enough to kiss me on his way out the door even when I had given him every reason not to. I fell apart in the way that women fall apart when something they have been taking for granted reveals itself as the load-bearing wall by leaving. The prayers started that evening, same words every morning for 11 weeks. God, fix my marriage. God, bring him back. God, restore what is broken. Sincere prayers. I want to be clear that they were sincere, but they were also, as my pastor eventually helped me understand, fundamentally misdirected. I went to see Pastor Raymond in September because the 11 weeks of praying had produced nothing except a deeper awareness of how empty the house felt without Wesley in it, and I needed someone to tell me why God was not answering. Pastor Raymond listened to everything: the marriage, the leaving, the prayers, the waiting. Then he asked me a question I was not prepared for. Heather, what did Wesley ask of you in the years before he left? I told him, year 4, year 5, the kitchen table Sunday, the specific things Wesley had named, the distance, the invisibility, the sense of being present in every practical sense and absent in every personal one. Pastor Raymond was quiet for a moment. Then he said what he said, that God had been answering my prayer for years, that the answer had been arriving consistently through the man I had married. Through every kitchen table conversation, every Saturday morning designed around my needs, every quiet attempt to reach across a distance I kept maintaining. That Wesley reaching for me had not been Wesley's personal preference. It had been the instrument of something larger trying to tell me what my marriage needed. And every time I had received it as a logistical complaint to be managed, rather than a cry from a man I was losing, I had rejected the answer without understanding that was what I was doing. I sat in Pastor Raymond's office for a long time after he finished, not because the words were complicated, because they were simple. The simplicity of something true that has been obscured for years by the comfort of a more manageable version. I had been praying for God to fix my marriage from the outside. God had been trying to fix it from the inside for 3 years. The instrument was my husband. The requirement was my attention. And I had been too distracted by the life surrounding the marriage to notice that the marriage itself was sending me signals I had learned to ignore. I called Wesley that evening, not to report what Pastor Raymond had said. That was between me and the 4 walls of that office. I called to ask him one question. Wesley, if I asked you to tell me again everything you told me at the kitchen table in year 4 and year 5, would you? All of it, without editing. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Are you ready to hear it this time?" I told him yes. He knew me well enough to know whether I meant it. He came over the following evening and sat across from me at the same kitchen table and said everything he had said before, and things he had not said before, things that had accumulated in the year since year 5, things he had stopped bringing because bringing them had begun to feel like leaving messages nobody was checking. I listened the way I should have listened 3 years earlier. Not to respond, not to manage, not to find the version of what he was saying that I could absorb without it requiring me to change anything. I listened the way you listen when you have finally understood that the person talking is not presenting a complaint, but handing you the blueprint for the thing you have been asking God to build. Wesley moved back home 6 weeks later. Not because everything was resolved, because enough had been said honestly and received genuinely that the foundation existed for something real to be built on. The building took time, real, unglamorous time, the kind that does not announce itself as progress, but accumulates quietly until one morning you realize the house feels different than it did. Caleb noticed first. He was 7, old enough to register atmosphere without having the vocabulary to describe it. He came downstairs one Saturday and found Wesley and me at the kitchen table together, talking, actually talking in the way we had not talked in years. And he went to the refrigerator and got himself a glass of juice and went back upstairs without saying anything. But he was smiling. Children who have been living inside a struggling marriage know before anyone tells them when something has shifted. Caleb knew. He took his juice and his smile back upstairs and left Wesley and me at the kitchen table with the particular morning light that Birmingham gets in October, and the specific ease of 2 people who have finally found the frequency they lost. I still keep the prayer journal. The prayers look different now. Not, "God, fix my marriage," not the prayer of a woman asking for an external intervention to correct a problem she has not yet agreed to examine. Something more honest, something that begins with the acknowledgement that the answer was already in the house, was already in the man who kissed me on the forehead on his way out the door because he loved me past the point where love made practical sense. I just needed to stop praying and start listening. He had been talking the whole time. If this story reached something in you, subscribe to True Lens Stories. New stories every day about the women who finally heard what had been waiting for them to go quiet long enough to receive it.